Welcome to another episode of Chad's Chat. Join Chad Chilius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by Chax Training and Consulting. If you'd like your company announced during our podcast introduction, consider sponsoring our podcast transcript. My name is Chad Chilius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor, as well as Director of Training Solutions and Principal at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I am Director of Media Productions here at Chax Training and Consulting. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists. And if you're looking to get your certification, head on over to accessibilityassociation.org/certification to get more information on that. Chad, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I have to be honest, I spent Christmas in Mexico.
Yes, I saw the pictures. Thank you for teasing me.
It was quite relaxing. Enjoyed some time with the family. And, Mexico is a delightful country. The people there are so nice and so kind. It was really a great time.
Yeah, me here, I'm holding on to the fort. It's Noah's Ark, as it were. It wasn't heavy rains, but it was heavy winds, and we had lots of trees. Matter of fact, it was so funny. If you go on Facebook, the Facebook Marketplace, you see a bunch of downed trees with free wood in the marketplace where people can go and they want you to come and cut their tree down. But I think we're having another storm on Monday, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's been an interesting thing.
California needed rain, but you don't want it this way, right?
Yeah, and the weatherman said, I hope we really need a lot more rain to come. I'm like, yeah, but let's not all have it at once.
Right.
Well, Chad, today we have a very special guest today, David Herr, who is Vice President of Enterprise Solutions at Allyant. And people may be listening to this going, Allyant? Who's Allyant? Right? Well, formerly CommonLook, right? So David, welcome to the program. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to meet your audience.
Yeah, awesome. Well, David, we wanted to have you on for a couple of different reasons. Full disclosure, we want you to give you an opportunity to talk about Allyant and CommonLook and that whole thing. But, I wanted to talk about accessibility checkers. And get your, kind of have a little discourse here. One of the things our Facebook group, and for those who don't know, we have a PDF accessibility Facebook group called PDF Accessibility, and we are over 3,000 members now, Chad, which is awesome. And somebody posted the other day, they said, I just became aware that the Acrobat checker is not a litmus test for accessibility. And I thought that was so interesting. And because one of the products that you have, David, is CommonLook, and I've been using CommonLook for a couple of years. I think four or 5 years now, and it's got all the checkers in it, right? I mean, wouldn't you say? I mean, it's got HHS, all the standards, I guess, HHS, PDF UA, all of those. What made you guys go through the process of what made you kind of decide to have all those different checkers in there?
Well, first of all, many, many years ago, in the CommonLook tool, through input that we received from clients in federal government and things like that, we originally started out with WCAG, 2.1 and then 2.0. And quickly, the government was asking us for special things like HHS because it was a slight deviation from 2.0 WCAG. And then, of course, the PDF UA standard came out, so we needed to add that. So we had built into our CommonLook remediation tool, CommonLook PDF, this report checker because of the things in Adobe Acrobat that were not reporting full compliance and, really wasn't an adequate checker. And it's kind of interesting because you'll see in RFPs and you'll see in government requirements, it has to pass the Adobe checker, but then they know that's not enough, so then they ask for it to pass another testing tool. So, we made the decision probably around 2015 that we were going to pull out all of our reporting component of CommonLook PDF and freely distribute it as the CommonLook Validator tool.
Right. And I actually had never heard of the CommonLook Validator tool as a free tool. I just had always known the full program. And so when we, as I started the Facebook group, 2016, I started hearing more about the CommonLook Validator, and I really just assumed they were just talking about the actual process of using the checker inside CommonLook proper. And then it was only shortly after that I realized, it's actually a free tool that you can go download and use to check your documents.
Yeah, it's kind of a gateway tool in a lot of ways from the standpoint of I'm using Adobe Acrobat to remediate documents. I mean, that's where I first start. When I first get into, I got to do, document remediation work.
Right.
And then I quickly learned that, just because I've now made the document pass the Adobe test, that's probably still not enough. So, anyone can freely add the Adobe to Adobe, the CommonLook Validator tool to their Adobe installation, and now do further testing and then can see what some of the other issues are. So that's why we put it out there, and we knew we were handling the standards, and we knew that there was the PAC tool that a lot of people use as well. But at the time, the PAC tool was only doing, I believe, PDF UA. So there was some gaps in it versus the others. So we said, okay, here's our full set with all the different standards built into it. And we just felt that it was a good tool to give out to the industry to allow people to really see some visibility into their documents.
Well, and I understand what you mean, Dave, when you say it's like a gateway tool. Kind of makes me think of like a gateway drug, when people use that term. But like the gateway tool in the sense that, anybody can freely check their document, right? But the report is likely going to show you potentially quite a few errors, right, in your file. And now the question becomes, okay, great, how do I fix it, right? And so if you're well versed in Acrobat, it can be done, right? And Dax and I have talked about this many times on the podcast about the approach of, okay, I'm going to do everything I need to do for accessibility inside of Acrobat, but there are so many third-party products out there that can save you so much time, so much frustration, and really make the process a lot less intensive, right? But by leveraging those products. So I think that, that's kind of what you're saying about the gateway tool. It's like, okay, great. I got this checker. I can check against all of these standards, but when those errors show up, I think for a lot of people, they're going to get the glassy eyes, the deer in the headlights, and be like, okay, how do I address all these problems?
Well,
absolutely.
One of the ones that first comes to mind for me is the B-box error. The B-box array missing, and try to explain to someone how to go into the content, the content tab, and then go into the properties, and then try to figure out what the coordinates are. And as soon as you get to content tab, eyes already start to glaze over. And then when you're talking about coordinates and all of that, I actually fixed. I didn't have. I wasn't on my normal computer, and I didn't have any tools available to me. I was at a conference on a brand new laptop, and I had to fix the B-box errors myself. And I will tell you, it was arduous. I used screenshots and Photoshop and to get the coordinates and figure out what was what. And it was definitely really intense. And I couldn't imagine trying to explain to somebody, but inside tools like CommonLook, it's a click. When the error comes up, it's one of the things I love about the checker is when the checker comes up and gives you the error, it says, okay, would you like to fix this one? And oh, by the way, would you like us to fix every other one that has this same issue? And it gives you that option to check that little box, and like magic, you go from, 1,200 errors or 500 errors down to like 20, right? Or, and it's just so great. But I will say, full disclosure, with great power comes great responsibility. There are times where you have choices to which way you want to fix it. And CommonLook's, the CommonLook checker, or the CommonLook proper tool, the full version of the tool, can only know so much. It doesn't understand your intent. And so you may inadvertently pick the wrong method of fixing it based on what you need for your document. So while we love to say how powerful checkers are, and in fact, CommonLook goes a step beyond a checker and actually provides you with several fixes, it really is important that you have a firm foundational understanding of accessibility principles, wouldn't you say?
Right. Absolutely.
Awesome. And to be clear, Dax, like the checker, right? That we were kind of talking about two different products, but the checker alone won't let you fix anything, right? The checker will show you the errors, but you can't fix anything with the checker alone. But within the CommonLook PDF, the checker is built in, and in that product, you can then fix those errors directly.
And do so much more. I think a lot of it is a lot like the pack checker, right? We talk about the pack checker. And David, you mentioned the pack checker earlier and how it was PDF UA only. Well, the dirty little secret is it's still PDF UA only. They just created a tab that says WCAG and the report that allows you to say WCAG. But all of the principles, if you look at it closely, all of the principles in the WCAG standard that it's checking, they all fall back to the PDF UA standard. So it's just a way of, I think it was a good addition to add WCAG, because a lot of these agencies want the WCAG report. They're like, I don't need to meet PDF UA. I just need to meet WCAG. And instead of having a 10 or 20 minute conversation with them about the merits of PDF UA versus WCAG, we're just like, we'll throw a WCAG label on there and, and we'll let people be happy. And in fact, Chad, maybe you want to talk about this. The new announcement is finally here from the pack checker.
Yeah, this was a recent addition, and I thought it was just so cool, because one of the big complaints that we often hear that people ask us is they say, and I'm sure you might hear this too, David, but regarding the pack checker, people are like, when are we going to get a Mac version of the pack checker, right? And Dax, I think it was about a year and a half ago now.
I think it was that long, yeah.
There was information coming from Axis 4 that they were working on a Mac version, and I've been saying that for the last year and a half, and we still haven't seen it. Now, in all fairness, I think part of the issue with that was that Apple switched from the Intel chip to the M1 chip.
Gotcha.
Which I think really screwed up the developers, in quickly being able to repurpose some of that code. But anyway, the announcement is that Axis 4 recently released an online version of the pack checker,
right?
That runs in your browser, and if you have a Mac, you can run your files through the online Pack 2021 checker, which is super, super cool. There is one limitation, and that is that it'll only accept files 10 megabytes or smaller. So if you're working on big projects, you're still going to run into a little bit of a challenge. But for basic jobs, that are under 10 meg, you just drop it in your web browser, and you've got the pack report right in front of you. So really, really cool addition from Axis 4. I'm going to give them kudos. So, we talked about Pack 2021. We talked about the CommonLook Validator, which, again, the CommonLook Validator is a plugin for, correct me, Dave, for Acrobat or Acrobat Reader or Adobe Reader. Is that correct?
Acrobat Professional. So if you're doing remediation work in Acrobat, then this tool will be a plugin. It won't plug into the Reader.
Got it. So CommonLook Validator is a plugin for Acrobat Professional. So most of us doing this work have that on our machines.
Right.
And so, you've got a couple of different options, and me personally, I've got all of them on my machine.
Yeah.
I find value in having multiple checkpoints when I'm remediating files. So I'll run it through the pack checker, and then I'll run it through the CommonLook Validator, and, kind of make sure that, two is always better than one, right? To try to make sure that you're meeting compliance. And I find that the CommonLook Validator is particularly helpful when you do have to remediate for HHS or Department of Veterans Affairs, who basically, I think Veterans Affairs also uses the HHS standard, if I'm not mistaken. But I know a lot of the federal agencies also use HHS as their guidance. And whenever I'm tasked with, verifying that a file meets those standards, I reach for the CommonLook Validator because it just makes the process a lot easier. HHS, typically, they'll give you kind of a PDF checklist of like, okay, these are the things you have to do. But it's way easier to be able to run it through the CommonLook Validator and just know that it kind of meets that standard.
So, David, you guys have an online version of the CommonLook Validator, right? Is that correct?
It's not the validator tool. It's called CommonLook Online, and it's really let me give you a little bit of background on who Allyant is, because I think it'll kind of feed into where some of these additional tools have come from.
Right.
So, most of your audience is probably familiar with CommonLook. I mean, we've been in this space for 23, going on 24 years now. And, so as a company, we were focused primarily on just PDF. We have a plugin for Microsoft Office, like a lot of organizations do, but it was still to generate an accessible PDF document when you're done.
Right.
And so CommonLook last year was acquired by a company called T-Base Communications. And T-Base Communications is owned by Thompson Street, who is really trying to develop this new company, which is now called Allyant, to be a premier accessibility vendor in this space. We're going to be looking to add additional services, products, and companies to our overall organization. And our goal is to make accessibility simple and easy and accessible to everyone, that we can make this something that is not, I got to go out and find 5 different vendors to solve these problems, but I can go to one source and have it taken care of. So
right.
In addition to T-Base and CommonLook, we also have a company called Accessible 360. So real high level, what we can offer is we can do digital audits. So we can do digital audits of websites and kiosks and in your web services, your web applications. And then we have a project management tool called the Hub that's a tool for managing your accessibility projects. So unlike the majority of the consultants in this space that basically want to send in a team of 100 consultants to go in and fix your giant website for millions and millions of dollars, our digital audits are intended to help companies see what their problems are, give them a process to work through their problems, show progress over time, and make their websites accessible. Because let's face it, web accessibility is not something you just come in and do and you're done and then you walk away. This is ongoing. It's forever.
Right.
So, I think that's the way a lot of managers who don't have knowledge of the accessibility space, when they first hear, oh, we've got to make our website accessible from some junior designer, they think, oh, well, we'll just hire someone to come in and do it. And they don't realize that it's an ongoing process. You can create as many templates as you want, but as soon as you have more than one person adding content to a website, you have an ongoing process of making sure it stays accessible.
Exactly. So, so the digital side allows clients to build a digital accessibility program for their web content so that it can be ongoing and they can continue to make progress and keep everything up to date. There's an accessibility checker tool built into it and a bunch of other stuff. On the T-Base side, it was a particularly good fit with CommonLook because many times, accessibility is accessibility. I mean, I need a document. Do I need it in accessible PDF? Do I need it in Braille? Do I need it in large print? Do I need it in audio? A client has, or a customer of mine has requested that their statement or whatever it is be given to them in a different format, in a format that they want to consume. And, companies recognize that they need to do that. So the T-Base side, we have 2 secure data centers, one in New York and one in Canada, where we process statements. So we do, statements for major organizations, banks, and insurance companies, and we take that data in securely. In fact, I went up there and it was amazing to see because it's all locked down. You can't bring a cell phone in there, to get access to where they're doing the printing because they're dealing with customers' private information. So we got all our Braille printers set up, and we're designed to be able to print statements for a bank for their Braille or large audio or audio or large print documents, in a secure environment. But one of the derivatives of what T-Base was finding was clients were asking for also accessible PDF, and they weren't as geared to do accessible PDF as, of course, CommonLook is. So, but they were developing software tools that dovetailed well with the CommonLook suite of tools. So when we were all acquired and we're all brought together, we looked at a tool that they had and we said, wow, this would be a fantastic tool to put out on the market for making documents accessible. Not necessarily 100% everything's perfect, but as much as you can do through automation as is possible.
Sure.
So it's called CommonLook Online, and it's a tool that you can upload PDF document to. You log into it. It's cloud-based, obviously, and you log into it. It's going to show me the document now in a graphical user interface, and it's going to show me what it's identified. These are heading levels. These are paragraphs. These are tables. These are images. And then you don't have to know anything about accessibility. You don't have to know anything about tagging. You just need to be able to, as the author of your document, accurately say, yes, that is heading level 1. Yes, that is heading level 2. If it's not, it quickly allows you to go in and just reorder the heading levels. And then you can make sure paragraphs are in the right reading order. So it's going to read this document in the right order. The images, it'll have you put in the alt text because that's pretty easy. Tables, it'll identify the tables and you can say, yep, that's heading levels, that's columns, that's rows, data, blah, blah, blah. Lists, all the other components of the document. Once it's done and you've identified the content, which it's already identified for you, you're just confirming that it's correct. And then you've checked the reading order and reordered the reading order if it did not get the reading order correct. It'll then generate an accessible PDF for you, or it'll generate a large text document for you. It's eventually going to be able to also generate Braille as well.
Oh, that's great.
So this is a tool that, will allow you to very quickly, in minutes, generate accessible PDF documents. They're not going to necessarily be 100%, PDF UA or WCAG compliant, because there's maybe some things that are not 100% correct, but they're very, very accessible documents that, especially in the education space where I have a student and I need to get a document out now for a class or, very quickly. This can allow people to process content like that in a very quick fashion. If you still needed to go back because you're going to put it on your website and you were worried about full compliance, you could obviously test it with CommonLook Validator, fix it with CommonLook PDF. But for the masses, for people just trying to create accessible content today very quickly, and they don't have accessibility experts on their staff, it's a great tool to be able to access.
Well, I think that one thing that people forget, we run into a lot, is that people want perfection, right? Yes. And they think that the document has to pass the checkers, and that is going to be the holy grail of everything. And I think we lose sight of what we're trying to do, no pun intended at all, but sure. I think we lose sight of the goal. The goal is no significant barrier and equity in how the content is presented. So I think we get wrapped up in the, WCAG success criteria 1.3.1, et cetera, when the reality is the person on the other end just wants to be able to walk through the document and get the information that's there. And so when you brought up a really great point about higher ed, when I just need to make sure that my student can get the information, I don't necessarily need to go in and reset B-box arrays or set unique cell IDs or setting note IDs. I just need to know they can get to the bottom of the page and see the footnotes there, right? Or know that this is a hyperlink, or know that this is the right read order. And that, I think, is where a lot of people lose sight. I know there are people listening to me right now, probably cursing me underneath their breath, saying, no, it's all about compliance. And how can we have a standard when we don't want to follow it? Well, the standard was there to bring us all together, to give us a common goal, right? And I think that we throw the baby out with the bathwater when we go, I want it to be a compliant document and pass WCAG, but then the screen readers don't read it correctly, or they don't get the information the way they think. And we're like, well, it's tagged correctly. It's the screen reader's fault. Okay, well, tell that to the person reading the document at 1:00 in the morning, trying to get through their homework before the class the next day.
I think what
Yeah.
people don't understand about automated testers as well is, there's manual verifications, obviously, that are part of any testing. And one of the things the CommonLook Validator tool does state these things need manual verification. It can't determine the alt text is correct. It can't determine the reading order is correct. But there's manual verifications that need to occur. We've been doing a good demo with in the automation space in the enterprise arena where I spend a lot of my time. Talking with a lot of the vendors, and they would say it's PDF UA. Our tool generates PDF UA. We've set the flag for PDF UA compliance in the file, so it's fully accessible. So, one of the things we've done in the past, we said, "Good, send me a sample. Let's get a sample." And so we'll take their sample and we'll remediate it properly, and then we'll play it with a screen reader, theirs, and it's a bank statement, for example, and it's reading the address, and then it's reading the total, and then it's jumping back to some more of the address, and then it's going over to the heading. I mean, it's ridiculous how bad it is. And then you show them what a properly tagged PDF, how it works in a screen reader. And of course, it's night and day. I mean, it's completely different.
Yeah.
And I think that opens some of their eyes to, it's not just a technical spec. It's not just I put the flag in it. And not that I tag the document. Great, you tag the document poorly. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things to it that it's not just a tool says, yes, I see tags. I see that there's a reading order established. I see there's some alt text gibberish under the images. I think it passed. And it's not the case.
Yeah, I mean, you could put that PDF UA flag on any file, right? Like there's no validation involved there, right? And I mean, you could technically put it on an untagged document, right? You know what I mean? So you're absolutely right. And Dax and I have talked about this several times, how compliance is a combination of automated and manual checking.
Yes.
And, back to your point of getting close without meeting the standards. I mean, I've done some testing on my end more out of curiosity, where to meet the standard, you have to do certain things. And I can't think of an exact example off the top of my head, but I've gone in and made the change as requested. But when I test it with a screen reader, there is absolutely no difference of how it's read, right? And so to that point, I mean, the standard is there for guidance, right? The standard is saying, for maximum compatibility, this is what we want you to do. But, to some degree, we're still at the mercy of the screen readers and how they behave, right? And if the screen reader itself is not operating to the standard, then it's kind of, a moot point, you know?
Chad, you bring up a good point. And I think a lot of this is about not understanding how a screen reader reads a document. It is the nothing about us without us syndrome, where people who are remediating documents don't really have a clear understanding of how a document is actually read. And in fact, Chad, we remind our listeners here that we have a class coming up on February 16th that is document testing with a screen reader. And we walk you through in 3 hours. You learn how to use a screen reader to evaluate the document. We give you some screen reader shortcut keys that you really need to know, because a lot of people get overwhelmed in the beginning. And then we have a screen reader usability checklist that helps you walk through all the key elements that you should be testing for. Because you and I say this so many times in the podcast, one of the most common questions we get in the Facebook group is, how does it sound to a screen reader when ... And my answer, we usually go open a screen reader, do a few tests and find out. But I want the unwritten comment I never make is, why aren't you testing your own documents with a screen reader?
Yeah. I mean, some of the question, that there are some things that I know off the top of my head how it is voiced, right? But I don't have it all memorized, right? And when people are like, I have an acronym of like my favorite one, I've done work for the USDA, right? The U.S. Department of Agriculture. And the acronym USDA is read by screen readers as USDA, right? And so, the question becomes, is it a problem? Well, it all depends, because standard writing style indicates that whenever you have an acronym, you spell it out after the first instance of that acronym. So if the user is reading from the beginning, sure, they're going to know that even though it voices it as USDA, it means, USDA.
Right.
But if they kind of jump to chapter 3 and start reading it, they may not know, what that means. So, those are all the challenges that we deal with, right? As far as like, and that is certainly the value. I mean, I taught an InDesign accessibility class yesterday. And when we did our introduction, one of the people said, I still have no idea the value of what I'm doing here, right? He's like, I'm following I'm listening to what people are saying. I'm doing what I'm told, but I don't really know why. And so in my class, I'm like, let me show you. And I opened up a document and I read it with a screen reader. And he's like, wow, that really makes a lot of sense. So for those of you out there who are listening, if you're in that situation, you're like, okay, I'm following the rules. I'm doing what I've been told, but you really don't understand why. There's huge value in either listening to somebody use a screen reader or testing a document yourself.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, we've the CommonLook approach for the first 20 years was always around standards compliance, because in a lack of the vacuum of accessibility, having some set of a roadmap or rules to accessibility, it needed to be there. One of the things that we see that's a big problem is then assistive technology companies not following the standards and going off in their own direction for whatever various reasons. And, not to pick on JAWS, but that particular tool doesn't always follow the standards. Sometimes they read content in a PDF directly and don't read the tags, and you get a different result in NDVA versus JAWS or versus other assistive technologies. So we've always kind of leaned towards, follow the standard, and then the standard will allow you to, have some consistency in the processing. But we've had companies and we have clients that come back to us and say, we know you did it to the standard and that's correct, but we test with JAWS, so you have to change this piece so it works better with JAWS. And we're like, but you're now breaking, it's not going to work necessarily better with another screen reader. I mean, so that's sort of an industry problem, but I think the standards in the end are going to prevail. I mean, the government requires the standards, so I think that's where ultimately it should go, and hopefully technology will follow that.
And I have to say, I don't agree. Because I don't mean that in a bad way, but the people that are taking people to court, they're not running the website against a WCAG checker or against validation. They're saying, I went here, I downloaded this document. It was supposed to tell me when my roads were getting closed in my area. I got fired from my job because the roads were closed and I was late, et cetera, and your document was not accessible. And as a state institution or a county agency, you needed to make it accessible. And so the barrier is the access to the information. It's not success criteria 1.3.1. Well, it kind of is, info and relationships, but I mean, it's not 1.4.2, non-text color contrast, I think is what that one is. But, it's not that kind of thing. It's literally, I couldn't understand the information in the document. Sure. So the agencies, the government holds so tightly around, well, you have to meet the standard, because they don't understand the user experience. Even the governments are still, I think, in a lot of ways, I hate to use the term, but clueless. The State Department, the U.S. State Department just released a report on the state of assistive technology, and the whole report was a train wreck. And when I asked them about the document and I tagged them in it and showed them how I could make it better in 8 minutes, I made the document like 80% better for accessibility.
Right.
When I asked them about it, they're like, yeah, we don't have the workload. We don't have enough people. And we released one version, and then in a few weeks, we'll release another version when we get to it. Right. And it all falls back to everyone wants to do the right thing. But how do we know what the right thing is, right? And on one hand, you have people saying, well, the right thing is following the standard. And if you follow the standard, the results will be right. And on the other hand, you have people who are using assistive technology on documents every single day saying, I still can't read this document. I don't understand what's going on in this table because the table had all THs in the entire table. Everything was table headings. But the pack checker or another checker said it was fine, even though it was an obvious error. And so, you know, I really, I don't know, you kind of poked the bear on this one. but I would much rather fall on the side of user experience than compliance. Compliance helps me get there, but it's really about the user experience.
And I think we can actually come to agreement because what I was alluding to was CommonLook's approach for many, many years was always standards compliance. That was the only way to go. And with the new Allyant influences and everything else, our CommonLook Online tool is more about make it the user experience. Let's get files out there quicker. Let's allow people to have accessible content available to them without all the hassles that can sometimes come with that. So, like, for example, that report could have been run through this tool, and very quickly they could have put up an accessible document that wouldn't have had the same complaints.
Right. It didn't start on page 7 after the first tag.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And I will tell our listeners, Chad and I had a chance to actually look at the CommonLook Online tool, and it's what you really have always wanted accessibility to be, is a very kind of point and click and say, this is an H1 and this is an H2. And, you know, imagine that you ran auto tag inside of Acrobat and it got it 80% correct. And you just had to go in and go, nope, that's an H2, not an H3, or this is a list and not a list of 2 items and not just a paragraph, that type of thing, right? It's very point and click. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to know tags, trees, and structure. You just have to understand the principles of outline levels and image descriptions, and you can really go a long way. I was actually really impressed. I had not seen the online tool until a couple weeks ago, and that's actually kind of when we approached you and said, hey, do you want to come on and, you know, talk about the tool a bit and, you know, talk about Allyant and the new, you know, CommonLook is now part of a larger organization, and you know, the idea of checkers being the end all be all and whether they really are or aren't, I think they're a hugely useful tool. I run my documents when I export from a source file. I run it through Acrobat. Then I'll fix what I need to fix. Then I'll run it through CommonLook, unless it's something really I know CommonLook, like linearizing tables. I can turn a table into body text in one click inside CommonLook. I am not going to do that inside Acrobat if I need to, right? So I'll open it in the right tool. I'll run it through whatever checker, and then I'll go back and then I run it through Pack at the end. And then I run it back through Acrobat once more, just to make sure that all of the checkers have a consensus of, is this document compliant?
Right.
And then, of course, I'll test with a screen reader if I know that there are areas that I might want to take a look at. Sometimes a lot of the things how do you know what to test for? For me, the answer to that is, do I have complex tables? Do I have complex infographics that I might have done something tricky with to make it read in a certain way? I'll go back and listen to how those sound in a screen reader to make sure that I've got a good user experience. I do not listen to an entire document using a screen reader. No. It's just not feasible, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I mean, I tend to look for anomalies, right? Like, when I have, I had mentioned acronyms, but, I'm working on a document right now. There's a lot of trademark symbols in there, you know what I mean? And the registered trademark symbols. And so, I'm like, okay, how does this sound? You know what I mean? How is that read? So Those are the things I kind of like look for anomalies in the document and test those areas, and certainly make sure that
graphic bullets.
Yeah, absolutely. Yesterday, Dax, when I was teaching that InDesign class, they used like an arrow for the bullet, and when you read it, it said H.
Yep.
And then it read the content of the listen H. You know what I mean? And and one of the things, we had mentioned this many times, info and relationships, right? And info with CAG, info and relationships is basically saying tag things as what they are. And I talked about how in InDesign, if you're not careful, if you don't create bulleted lists correctly, they're just going to be tagged as a paragraph. And in the case of those bulleted items, now it's even harder to understand, because when you read it and it's tagged properly, it's at least telling you you're going into a list. And so I think most users can surmise that when it says H, okay, I think I could probably figure out that's the bullet. But when it's just read as a paragraph, you're like, what's going on here? I don't have the context to understand, what I'm hearing, what's being voiced to me.
Well, one of the other things that we hear, the reason for a list too, is it tells you how many items are in that list, right? So if you hear list 10 items, I know I'm getting ready to hear 10. The one thing that's a pet peeve of mine though is the list one item. And I'm just like, I hate that. Oh, it bothers me so much, because now I've got to go through and go, okay, is one sock a pair of socks? Right? I mean, it's just one. So it's not really a list of one items. I'm going to take my list to the grocery store and I'm going to buy eggs. That's not
Dax,
a list.
That's a really good point. Because I'm constantly reminding people, and this is kind of InDesign specific, but either A, if you don't create your bullets correctly, or B, you map a bulleted item to a P tag, it actually tags it as a paragraph. What you just said makes me think that there could be value in doing that at times, right?
Yeah.
Like if you only have one bulleted item,
map it to the P tag.
I do want to tag it as a P tag, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this was totally a learning experience, Dax.
It always is, Chad. Between you and I tell you, every episode we just learn. There's always some nugget of wisdom. It's one of our listeners said the aha moments, right? Where we have those aha moments, and this is one of them. So
because I'm like drilling it into people's heads, like never do this. But what you just said, I'm like, wait, there might be a time when you want to do this. It's really cool.
Absolutely. So I did want to let people know once again, before we close out the show here, we have document testing with a screen reader. That's February 16th, right? That's coming up. And then we have accessibility for Microsoft Word, and that's coming up as well in February. That's February 9th. And all these classes are always 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And if you use coupon code NEW 2023, you'll get $75 off. And that makes it $224 for 3 hours worth of training plus handouts. It's an amazing deal, guys. And I know this podcast is going to be released on Tuesday coming up here. But Thursday, the January 12th, is our Designing with Accessibility in Mind. And then we have Accessible Table Basics on January 19th. So head over to accessibilityunraveled.com and click on the training, and you'll see the different courses and classes that we have going on, and definitely take advantage of that. We'd love to see you in those classes. David, before we go, is there anything that you want to let our listeners know about Allyant or CommonLook, or anything that you think is relevant that they might want to hear?
Just that if you haven't checked out who Allyant is, come to our website at allyant.com. We will be at CSUN and doing a major rollout of our new brand to the accessibility industry, because I do think there's still a lot of confusion of who's this Allyant company.
Right.
You know, we got over 300 employees now. We're a much larger organization.
Wow.
We are in a much stronger position to continue to build accessibility tools to help people, you know, do what's right. And we're excited to be able to do it.
And you bring up a really good point. CSUN is now open for registration, right? It is open, and that is March 13th, 2023. I tell you, if you have one conference to go to where you really want to have a firsthand experience of being in an environment where people with disabilities are using assistive technology, CSUN is a great opportunity. And there are amazing speakers. Chad and I were doing a pre-conference lab. And as a matter of fact, it is document testing with a screen reader. And it's going to be literally a full day lab. So we're taking our online class and we're expanding it into this giant big deep dive. And like you, we are going to have a booth at CSUN for the first time ever. Make sure you come by and see Chad and I at our CHACS training and consulting booth. We're excited.
Yes. We'd love to meet you.
Excellent.
All right, everybody. Once again, we want to thank CHACS Training and Consulting for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. And just remember, if you're looking for in-person or online training or struggling to establish an accessibility program within your organization, head over to accessibilityunraveled.com to learn more. My name is Chad Chilius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where each week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.